Hello, this is Dr. Flight, and this is a video presentation on managing marketing information, part 1. So this corresponds with the course and the text in chapter 3, and will introduce the idea of marketing management and offer some information as it relates to ongoing marketing research and specifically a marketing information system. So much of what's in this chapter, this material in part 1 and also material in part 2, would be from a managerial perspective, but it very much relates to and reinforces what you already know from marketing research and your marketing research course that you've had in the past. So as you read chapter 3 and as you look at this material, bear in mind that much of this may be review. It may be something that you're already familiar with. But again, I want you to think of it and consider the information from the point of view of a manager who is going to use information. You may not necessarily be producing information like a market researcher would, but you're certainly going to be using it to manage your position, to manage the organization, your brand, and your products. So that's what this is all about. Sit back, enjoy the video. Let me know, reach out to me, talk to me if you have any questions about it, and otherwise enjoy. Okay, so here's where we want to begin. We want to take a look at why we want to gather data, use information, and what the purpose of it is and what market research is all about, more or less from a ground level. And then we'll get into some more specifics as we move along. So think broadly in the sense that information is a powerful tool. It can be a resource that you use in your organization. If you remember, we talked about resources in resource advantage theory, and we said that resources can be leveraged in order to gain a sustainable competitive advantage. Well, one of those resource areas that you can do this from is information, the information resource. So information certainly can serve as a powerful tool that you can use. If you have the right information at the right time, in the right format, then you can make good, strong decisions, which managers need to do. Today, one of the challenges, quite frankly, is that we have a lot of data and a lot of information to deal with. So just like consumers have a lot of information that they have in order to make decisions, we have a lot of information too. One of our challenges is being able to analyze that information and use it to make good decisions. So what is market research, and moreover, why is it needed, and how are we going to capture information to make good decisions? Well, market research is a process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information. That's one definition of what market research is. Other textbooks and other courses that you've had will define it very similarly, but they may add a thing or two here. So Bush and Burns are two authors who have a textbook in marketing research, and they define marketing as a process of designing, gathering, analyzing, and then reporting information that may be used to solve a specific marketing problem. So that is, again, it's very similar. The idea is we want to gather information, we want to analyze it, we want to do some reporting, and then we're doing it for a purpose, though. The last one I'll leave here is AMA's definition, and Joe Hare and his authors, his co-authors in his textbook, define it as the function that links an organization to its market through the gathering of information. So this definition clearly illustrates that marketing research is a function, it's a task or a process that's organized, or it's used in an organization. What it does is it bridges the gap between the firm and the customer. or the market in this particular case, which is absolutely true. That's one of the things that researchers do is they bridge or they act as a conduit between the decision makers at the firm and the customers who are deciding things to purchase. So why is marketing needed? Marketing research needed? Well, it's needed to make decisions. The bottom line is, as managers, we have to make decisions every day, and we want to make informed decisions. We want to form strategy, and we want to deploy our resources appropriately. So when we make a decision, it leads to some type of action. The challenge is we want to make a decision that leads to an action by using information. That information that we have available to us is typically given to us or acquired through the research process. So that's why we need to do research, and that's what marketing research really is all about. So to make this work, we typically want some type of a research program or a agenda or a system, if you will, to help us conduct research so that we can create this information to make decisions with. The different types of information then that we're gathering are typically done through two different processes. One would be a process where data is gathered on an ongoing basis. The other would be a system where we have specific research questions that are being asked and answered. So in one case, we have ongoing business operations which provide the information that we need to make daily decisions on operating our business on a day-to-day basis. So ongoing research, ongoing data analysis that happens regardless of anything else. And then every once in a while we'll have a research question that arises and we need an answer. So like we might be doing a market analysis, or we might be deciding whether we should launch a new advertisement. So we want to test that advertisement, or we want to try to understand how our competitors will react if we make a price change, for instance. So those are three examples of how we might have a specific question that requires a specific research project. So two very different types of processes, I guess, that would then lead to information that we could then use. So what we'll do here, and again, this is part one of this, of understanding and managing information. So what we're going to do in this part is we're going to talk specifically about ongoing data collection and what that's all about. Part two of this, of these videos will deal with specific data collection and that process that goes on there. And make a note that this part two here, this specific data collection process, is typically what you learn in marketing research class. So the marketing research course that you had will illustrate a system, a set of steps that you take in order to do research, and that is what is communicated there in the second half of chapter 3 and of this video series. So let's jump right into ongoing or operations-based marketing research. So what we want to do is have a system or a process in place that allows us to gather information based on our regular business operations and then use that information to help us help inform us on what we should do from a manager's perspective. We call this process a marketing information system, or MIS. So the marketing information system pulls together resources the firm has in order to give us the information we need to make decisions. It's a process, so it's a process that includes computer software engineering. It also includes people. It also includes just the information that we're gathering. And the point of it is to be able to do these things, to identify, collect, analyze, accumulate and dispense critical information for decision makers. So that's something that you're going to see as a definition type of a thing. But broadly speaking, think of MIS as Management of Information Systems, or CMIS, which would be Computer Managed Information. Think about databases. Think about relational databases like Access and things of that nature that are designed and engineered to house information and then be able to produce information that managers need to use. So it's that idea, only it's applied to marketing. Okay, so this is a computer engineering idea, but it's focused on delivering marketing information that marketing managers are able to use. Okay, so what is a marketing information system, and MIS? Stated again, and what the process here is for the MIS to do 5 specific things. Okay, remember that it is a combination of people who are working it, equipment or software, and then processes or procedures. So remember, there are 3 things that make MISs work, and they do 5 outputs for us. They gather information, they sort information, they analyze information, they evaluate the information that we have, and they make it distributed. They put it out there so that people can use it. It's distributed in a timely manner, and it's accurate so that marketing decisions can be made. And that's a big deal here. That's the point of it. All right, so think computer information systems so that we can make decisions. Key point here is organizations need to have an automated system so that we can use it to deal with lots and lots and lots of data, huge amounts of data. This data can be organized, it can be analyzed, and it can be distributed. So again, that's kind of what market research does. And an MIS system is an internal component that helps us do this in-house, okay, for ongoing research. Just for a quick visual, just for a visual display, we have data that emanates from either inside the firm or outside the firm. We're going to call those data sources. And then we have our MIS system, and of course this is like much more complicated than a simple box, but it does these five elements that we're talking about. And then we output it, and we have dashboards and reports, and we have this display that managers can access, which helps them do their job. All right, so as we're getting more into the MIS concept and the key design issues, we want to answer some certain questions so that the design of the MIS is appropriate. Now, in this course, we really don't design MIS systems. There's a whole field of study that does. So it would be incomplete if we tried to talk about this in huge depth. But again, as a manager and a user of this information, you may not be deeply involved in the development of the databases that are used in the MIS system, but you'll be using the output that these databases produce. So some background is warranted and helpful here. So some of the key aspects here, we want to be aware of and consider who's collecting the information that we're evaluating. What information is going to go into the system, so what data is going to go into the system. What we need to know, like as the decision maker, like what information needs to come out of the system. So do I need to know things like current daily sales and average sales margin and satisfaction levels and loyalty levels and blah, blah, blah. What data do I need to know to be able to track my goals and objectives? Okay, and then finally we have safety and security issues as well. Remember I mentioned that the marketer a researcher is often the conduit between the firm and the consumer or the market. So the researcher acts as a buffer or a bridge, and that researcher has to protect the identity of the market but they also have to produce valid data for the manager of the firm. So that researcher then has a significant responsibility when it comes to maintaining privacy and things like that. So yeah, I mean these are some key decisions then, or key inputs or thoughts when this design goes into place, and we should definitely pay attention to those. Other things to think about. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about sources of data and the types of data that we might actually be looking at specifically. When we think about the sources of data or the types of data, you can just kind of browse this list. Pause the video if you want. It's perfectly fine to do that. Get a feel for what types of data we're going to be looking at. We ask things like where the customer came from, whether they had any points of contact with us in the past, how much did they spend with us, how did the customer come to us, like did they come to us from another website, did they come to us from just walking in off the store, did they come to us because we reached out to them and pushed them like an advertisement. I mean, exactly why and how did they come to us? How much did they buy? How many units did they buy? How much did they spend with us? How much was our margin? I mean, there's a whole bunch of data that happens on an ongoing basis just by virtue of us doing business. And so these are the types of things that we want to, gather and get information on. Additional ones, customer service, will they rate us? How satisfied are they? And so forth. So again, as you think about, well, what data could we put into the MIS? All these things could be put into the MIS, and they would all be helpful for us as we move forward. Where does the data come from? So sources of information. Where does the information come from? Well, it comes from the the salespeople. It comes from data that we already have in-house. It comes from inquiries that the customers make. It comes from transactions. So transaction data is a big, kind of source of data, and so forth. So think about your internal employees and them providing data and feedback. Think about internal databases that already exist or historical transaction data. That's pretty much the primary source of internal data. When we look outside the firm, like what we can think about what's coming from beyond, think about sources that we don't have. So secondary sources, syndicated data sources. You might buy a data set, for instance. You may look at macro environment data like the GDP and overall income of the market. Things like that. So macro environment type things. And broadly speaking, when we talk about macro data, sometimes we call this marketing intelligence overall. But we also may have primary data that we collect. We have panels that we collect from. We may collect data from social media posts, online comments and ratings, followers, likes, and so forth. So there's actually a whole host of places where we can gather data from. And that would be outside the company. And then as I mentioned, there are internal sources of data as well. All right, so that's a look at this ongoing data perspective that we have. What we'll do real quick, and this will segue into part 2 of our this video series. As I mentioned, there is ongoing research as a process that's illustrated in the MIS system. But we also have specific project-based research where we have a identified problem that we have that we're trying to solve. So you'll remember that this project-based research is what you most likely focused on in your marketing research class. You use it to answer specific questions. You use this in a well-defined set of activities that are planned and organized. So market research projects are done kind of in a process system. that are organized that way. When things are organized, assuming you follow a set of steps, for instance, then the decisions that you're able to make will be based on valid and true data. So that's kind of a big thing. And also, one of the reasons why we do this is we typically look to have some objectivity involved. And again, that reaches out to this idea that the researcher removes the manager from the data by 1 degree, and that way the manager can be kind of more objective, and then the researcher doesn't have to be also the manager making a decision. So there's an idea of validity, of reliability, of impartiality, and so forth that's tied up to having a process and having somebody else do this research for you as you move forward. From a managerial perspective, we have decisions to make. One of the very first decisions you make when you're doing this type of research, as opposed to the MIS system, which is ongoing, this type of research is a choice to participate in or not. And this choice comes with a cost. So it's going to cost you some money and time and effort. And there are 4 different things to consider before you begin a market research project that will impact you as a manager. One is simply the benefit versus the cost. You know you're going to have to spend some money to have this research done. The question is, will the information you get be worth the cost you have to give up? You also have to be willing to commit time to this endeavor. So do you have the time to do a research project before a decision has to be made? Third, we want to think about the nature of the decision in the sense of how important the decision is, and whether when you make the decision, will it have a very, very big impact on your firm? If it does, then you want as much information as possible before you make that decision. So if the decision is very important, then it gives you more reason to do research on a specific project-based level than less. And then finally, our ability to access the market, access our respondents, and where we can obtain data is sometimes a challenge. So if a research design is problematic, then we may not be able to access data. So that may be a 4th consideration then, although less than probably the other 3. It's still a consideration moving forward. Okay, so I know this is segueing into part 2 of this process. The text that we have that we're looking at illustrates a 6-step process. A 6-step process to be able to jump into. So the 6-step process begins with defining the research problem, then extends into developing a research design, followed by doing an exploratory form of research with secondary data. Then the data collection, if it's a primary data source that you're going to be using, then analyzing the data, and then finding the findings and the reporting. So these 6 steps then go in order. You don't necessarily do all of them every time. And other textbooks will expand this and actually grow this out. So there's actually, in fact, 11 different steps if you look at other textbooks. These 11 steps are actually subsumed or collapsed into the 6 steps that you just saw, which our text uses, which leads us to be very curious, like, what's going on? Do we need to do all 11 steps? Do we do 6 steps? What exactly do we do? I am confused. Yikes. Well, there's nothing magical about 6 or 11 steps. Just keep that in mind. And some firms will use a very structured approach, while others will not necessarily use a structured approach. Also, not all studies necessarily use every step in order. Sometimes you have to go back and repeat a step or two. And the last point that we'll mention here is that research projects and project-based research is typically heavily outsourced. So while the MIS process, you're going to use a computer scientist and computer engineer and data manager to help you do that, and it may be outsourced to another department. The research projects will typically be commissioned by a marketing manager, and very, very, very often the marketing manager will hire an outside firm to actually do a project-based research project, I guess, for you. Okay, so this wraps up kind of what we're going to talk about here in part one. Again, there is a second part to this which continues from this point on. So at any rate, again, let me know if you have any questions. Look forward to talking to you and touching base with you on this material. Thanks.